After Arthas awoke from the frozen throne, the Lich King set about conquering the world south of Northrend. With his legion of mindless ghouls, abomination, Nerubians, frostworms, and all other manner of unholy creatures, he made great progress. But too, he needed captains to do his bidding on the battlefield. He needed officers, skilled in combat, necromancy, and spreading death and pestilence, but smart and cunning as well as loyal to lead his troops. So he turned his mind to the old champions of the Lich King and set about raising warriors, just as he used to be. Death Knights. Death Knights are unholy warriors that fight with a combination of brute strength granted by undeath, unholy rune magic such as blood, plague, and frost, and have a mastery over necromancy. They were fiercely loyal to the Lich King by design, and ultimate weapons of terror and war. After the Battle of Light's Hope Chapel, a chapter of these Death Knights broke free from the hold of the Lich King and vowed to bring about his end, no matter the cost. The Death Knights in-game were accepted by the Horde and Alliance as allies in the fight against the Lich King at the behest of Tyrion Fordring and Darion Mograine. But what were the actual legal ramifications on the individual Death Knights as a result of their resurrection, killing sprees, defection, and eventually their return to their respective factions? Join me over 2 videos as I explore how I believe the Alliance Death Knights would have been treated by the civil law and criminal law of their faction. As there are many civilizations in the World of Warcraft with different cultural context and likely different legal systems, it's not possible to say with 100% certainty how accurate this video is to what would happen in this scenario in the World of Warcraft. But it is based on the law as it was historically applied, the law as it is applied today, and the way the law of Warcraft is constructed, so this is my best guess for how, precisely, these scenarios may resolve. This basically revolves around the Humans of Stormwind legal system, as I believe it is the closest analogue to the legal system today. For a video like this to work, I have to make some assumptions about the courts. Therefore, I will be talking specifically about the Alliance Death Knights of the Ebon Blade who took part in the starting area, by which I mean the Death Knights that took part in the sacking of the Scarlet Village below Acheros. The law can be broadly separated into 2 areas: the criminal law that dictates the punishment of criminal offenders, and the civil law, which has jurisdiction over pretty much every other area of law that affects an individual, such as the law of wills and estates, tort law, contract law, and everything in between. This first video will refer specifically to the criminal law. As we know, the actions of 3rd generation Acheros Death Knights are excused by proclamation from King Rin. But what is the reach of Rin's proclamation? Is it realistically just a standing order to the military to not attack Acheros Death Knights on sight? Stormwind's legal jurisdiction, the place in which it has power to prosecute persons, would most likely not extend to the Plague Lands. That would have historically fallen under the jurisdiction of the Kingdom of Lordaeron. Since World of Warcraft specifically outlines that the Acheros Death Knights performed their criminal actions of murder and the like in the Plague Lands, the actions of Acheros Knights at the Death Knight starting area are outside of Stormwind's legal jurisdiction. Because of this, in the eyes of the law, the Death Knights did not commit any specific crime that the Crown of Stormwind can bring an action on. Therefore, the royal proclamation could not be a pardon, since, according to the law of Stormwind, the Death Knights are not criminals. It is instead far more likely that the proclamation is an order to the military that Rin commands, as king, to stand down from attacking the Acheros Knights as they were. Further, the proclamation also then dictates that the Acheros Knights be inducted to the Alliance and treated as equal citizens. The proclamation reads, King Varian Rin yells, "People of Stormwind, citizens of the Alliance, your king speaks. Today marks the first of many defeats for the Scourge. Death Knights, once in service of the Lich King, have broken free of his grasp and formed a new alliance against his tyranny. You will welcome these former heroes of the Alliance and treat them with the respect you would give any ally of Stormwind. Glory to the Alliance." There are things to be said about the reach of the specific governmental powers of Varian or Anduin as sovereign, but that can wait for another video. We will simply assume that the king alone has the ultimate power to both command the military forces as well as incorporate any class of persons into the Alliance, be it of a species or of a specific background. On the facts we know, it appears as if the effect of the proclamation wasn't a real pardon for the Death Knights of Acheros. It simply allowed them to be free from attack from the Alliance military and to be welcomed back into the Alliance to serve as citizens. However, if an Acheros Knight committed a crime in Stormwind's jurisdiction while under the control of the Lich King, this proclamation did not serve as a pardon, as I just stated. Instead, that knight would be liable for criminal prosecution before Stormwind's court. There may, however, be defences available to that Death Knight. I will put this as simply as I can, but bear in mind it is more complex than this in practice. When a crime is prosecuted, it is broken down into 2 sets of elements: the actus reus, or physical elements, and the mens rea, or fault elements. These elements are derived from the statute. The physical elements describe the physical acts that comprise the crime. For example, in murder, the physical element of the crime is simply causes death, meaning a person has fulfilled the physical element of murder if they committed an act that caused death. The fault elements of murder are that a person must intend to cause death, or intend to cause grievous bodily harm, or be reckless as to whether or not they cause death, or be reckless as to whether or not they cause grievous bodily harm. All crimes are broken down in this way with the separation of physical and fault elements. For a person to be convicted of the crime they are charged with, the prosecution must prove, beyond reasonable doubt, all elements of the crime. With murder, however, the 4 fault elements are actually one fault element that reflects the murderer's state of mind. In a murder trial, it is only necessary to prove one fault element to achieve a conviction, not all 4 listed. For the purpose of this, we will assume one Death Knight killed one Stormwind citizen in Elwyn Forest while under the influence of the Lich King. This clip will act as the reference. Once the knight is arrested, charged, and brought to trial, it is the job of the Crown Prosecution, representing the state, in this case the Crown of Stormwind, to prove all elements of the murder to achieve a conviction using their evidence. In this case, as you saw in the clip, there were 2 children nearby to act as witnesses, so we can assume the physical act of murder is easily proven beyond reasonable doubt. Then, the prosecution must prove that the Death Knight intended to commit the act that killed the man, in this case, the swinging of the sword. If this was a regular murder committed by someone other than a Death Knight under the influence of the Lich King who was perfectly sane, then the fault element of intending to cause death would likely be proved, and that person could then start claiming a defense, such as provocation or self-defense. However, while a Death Knight would still have the full ranges of defenses available under the law, there would likely be a special defense that would be adopted under common law specifically for Death Knights under the control of the Lich King. This would be very close to automatism in today's law, but would only apply to a Death Knight who committed a crime while controlled by the Lich King. Automatism is the legal term used to explain an act that was committed by a person completely involuntarily. The defense may raise automatism at any point with evidence as a rebuttal to a fault element that they were acting voluntarily. Once they do this, the burden then shifts to the prosecution to disprove beyond reasonable doubt that they were acting automatically. If a person successfully argues automatism, they are entitled to a full acquittal, meaning they have the charges dropped immediately. So, in our scenario, the Death Knight kills the man and is charged with murder. At trial, the prosecution proves that the Death Knight killed the man, and the defense does not contest this. Then, the defense raises the argument of automatism, that the Death Knight, being under control of the Lich King, had no control over his actions and should not be convicted of the crime. The prosecution obviously cannot disprove this, as it would be an extremely simple thing to check if the Death Knight was actually under the control of the Lich King at the time he killed the man. The judge under a common law system would agree with the defense and, in their judgment, hold that the Death Knight be acquitted and adopt into common law the defense of Death Knight-specific automatism. This has been a pretty broad overview of the criminal law and how it would affect Death Knights, both the royal proclamation delivered by King Rin and how a Death Knight under the control of the Lich King would likely be treated in criminal proceedings. This will be the first video of 2 about Death Knights and the law of Stormwind. If you enjoyed this, please like, comment and subscribe, and I'll have more videos about law in fiction coming out in the future. Thanks! Bye!